we're going to look at how we know where to round off our calculated numbers. And it basically depends on the numbers that you use to do the calculation. For example, in this density, these two numbers are not exact numbers. They're both measured numbers. We can see that we're talking about a mass and a volume, and those will not be exact. They're measured. And so when we write our answer, we know that we can't have all the digits because these only have 2. I mean, it's not like we had 7.00000, then we may be able to keep more. Some of these are just what our calculator kicked out. And so we need to decide where to round. And to do that, we need to learn a few terms and some little tricks, and then we'll get back to the actual rounding our calculated numbers. So the first thing is I need to give you is a definition of significant figures. And we've kind of already said this. Significant figures are all of those that are known with certainty plus one that is estimated. So the last one on the right can be estimated. Okay, and so that's if you're given a number. Those are significant figures. If you're given a number that has leading and ending zeros, though, it's a little trickier. And so I want to give you these definitions. Any zeros that are on the left, these are leading. And any zeros on the right of the non-zero digits are ending zeros. And those are tricky. Anything that's not a zero counts as a significant figure. It is a known quantity. Any zeros that are sandwiched, like this one, it is an actual known quantity. On this one, well, I won't get to that. But anyway, so let's kind of know those terms, leading and ending zeros. Notice it doesn't matter where the decimal place is. Anything in the front is leading, anything in the back is ending. So the skill we need to have is to be able to look at a number and count how many significant figures it has. And so the rule is the leading zeros never count. And the ending zeros count only if a decimal point is shown. And I really emphasize that word shown because you have to actually see the dot. In other words, this dot, that's what I mean. If I have a number like this, there's no dot there, so an ending zero doesn't count if this is an ending zero, right? If I did actually show the dot there, then that zero would count as a significant figure. So this is an important skill we need to have as far as looking at a number and counting its sig figs. Let's try a few examples. So if you want to get ahead of me and see what you can do with these, you can pause. But just going through these, leading zeros never count. Anything that's not a zero counts, so all of those do. And then I get to this ending zero, and it does count because I see a dot here. There is a decimal shown. So all of those count. People will put a line over or under significant figures just to kind of keep track. Okay, on this one, these are ending zeros. There is a decimal point shown, so they all count. We would say this has 4 sig figs. Okay, on this one, all of those zeros are sandwiched, and so they all count. On this one, we have ending zeros, but no decimal point is shown. So these ending zeros don't count. I would have just these two. On this number, when I have it in scientific notation, I treat this front part just as though it's another number. In other words, I can pretend like this part isn't there. And if I look at this, I have an ending 0, and it does count because a decimal point is shown. So I have 4 sig figs here. Okay, now that we can count sig figs, let's learn the rules for doing calculations. And there's 2 different rules. And if you have a calculation that involves both, you have to do one rule at a time and keep track of your sig figs in between. So the first rule is what we use for multiplication or division. And what we do is we look at the numbers that are used and we count how many sig figs they have. This top number has 2 sig figs. The bottom number just has 1 sig fig. The number used with the least sig figs determines where to round the answer. So I have to round this answer to just 1 significant figure. So I'm going to drop off all of that. And then this is, okay, so that dropped to 1 sig fig. We have a different rule for addition and subtraction. On this rule, you do not count sig figs, and that's what gets people. What you do is you line them up and cut them off, is how I like to say it. And by line them up, I mean line up the decimal places, and then cut off your answer according to the one that goes least far to the right. In other words, this top number only goes 2 past the decimal, so that's where I have to cut off my answer, is 2 past the decimal. And so on this one, I'm going to write 1.2, and then I always do consider if it rounds up or not. And sometimes people want to round this up. It's like the optimists like to do that because they want to say the 9 rounds up the 4 and so on. But you don't do that. You look one place to the right. If it's 5 or greater, it rounds up. So on this one, I'm not going to round up. I'll just have a 4.